a smart home and what you need to start your first smart home. Today we're gonna start to zero to talk about smart home for beginners. To build a smart home, what you need first, you need a good Wi-Fi connection. For example, we got this one, we got the kitchen, bedroom one, and we got living room, we got bedroom two, and we got this. Sometimes your mobile internet with your water, Wi-Fi water, the Wi-Fi place in the basement, we don't really have good internet upstairs. But for example, your Wi-Fi box in the living room, in the bathroom, you don't have internet in the bathroom, or you don't have internet in the bedroom. We find so many problems when people don't have internet in the bathroom, like internet for them, you don't have Wi-Fi in the bathroom, some kitchen, you don't have Wi-Fi. And this, right now, what you really need to get good Wi-Fi for your smartphone. First, what you need is mesh Wi-Fi. A mesh Wi-Fi is a router with 2 or 3 satellites, depending on how many square foot your apartment. For example, if your Wi-Fi mesh Wi-Fi is in the basement, you don't really have sometimes that the internet in the kitchen if you don't have internet in the bathroom. If you're over the Wi-Fi, put the good Wi-Fi and the red zone, maybe you can have internet in the kitchen, you got internet, and the very one, you don't have internet, Wi-Fi internet. If your water flat in your living room, you have good internet in the bedroom room, you got good internet in the kitchen, bedroom one is on the back, you don't have internet in the back. Right now, what we're gonna do, we're gonna buy a mesh Wi-Fi. They got so many brands. I'm gonna put some on the screen. You can see. We take like the water, the main internet water, like for example, Verizon or AT&T give you a mesh internet Wi-Fi. For example, we put the anyway, and the living room. We got a provider. And we do the provider internet. This is the provider internet. This is the internet, the box Wi-Fi, Verizon or AT&T, your provider internet give it to you. We're not gonna use the Wi-Fi inside the house. We're gonna use the mesh Wi-Fi. The mesh Wi-Fi we got a router. We're gonna connect the router exactly to the mesh Wi-Fi by the cable. After that, we're gonna get this one called satellite. The satellite is gonna place the satellite between the kitchen and the bedroom one. Right now, the water gonna give you Wi-Fi for over here. They give you Wi-Fi for over here. You're gonna get the same Wi-Fi, only one password, only one IP address. Don't forget, do not never use an extender in your smart home, in your house, because the extender got different IP within your world. Because anytime you want to connect to the extender, you will call on the password. Even if you put the same password you have your router, you're not going to have the same internet because the IP is different. For example, if you got your water, some people got the water in the basement. This is the water in the basement. This is your provider, your internet in the basement. This is the provider put the internet in the basement. What we're gonna do right now, we're gonna connect to the mesh Wi-Fi. Right now, because it's in the living room, we're gonna have 2 satellites. We're gonna place the satellite over here, the satellite over there. Right now, we're not gonna use the password. When we set up the mesh Wi-Fi, the mesh Wi-Fi gonna use for all hours. We're gonna have this one gonna get Wi-Fi over here, this one gonna have Wi-Fi over here. The same Wi-Fi password for all hours. And anywhere you go, we got the same Wi-Fi covered. first thing you're gonna need for your smartphone. Even in your house, you need the same internet Wi-Fi, you need the mesh Wi-Fi. The second thing you need for your smartphone, you need a hub. A hub can be a Apple TV, can be a hub. A hub can be a smart speaker. I'm going to talk about this in the Apple HomePod Mini. A hub can be a Google, a hub can be an Alexa speaker. This is a smart speaker hub. Right now, what about the hub? For example, I got a hub over here. This one is a Apple TV. This one, okay, let me take this one. For example, this one is a Apple TV Blue. This Apple TV is a hub. The hub gonna connect to the Wi-Fi to connect it to your every smart thing you need. It can be light, it can be outlet, it can be anything. Smart thing, very smart. And right now, to build a smart home, you really need a voice assistant. The voice assistant, like I'm telling you, is, for example, is a Alexa. In the beginning, you have to make a choice what voice assistant you need and you want to use. Why you need a voice assistant in your house? For example, we take this one like a smart speaker. It can be Alexa, it can be Apple, and it can be Google too. I got another smart speaker. It can be Alexa, it can be Apple, it can be Google. I got another smart speaker over here. It can be Alexa, it can be Apple, it can be Google. It depends what you want to use. Me, I use Apple because I got an Apple phone. Reason why you need a smart speaker? If I got the smart speaker, I got the light over here, a smart light. I got the smart light. I say the smart speaker, I call the smart speaker, for example, okay, Alexa. I say, Alexa, turn on the light. I talk to the speaker gonna turn on the light in the living room. If I'm in the living room, I can say, Alexa, turn on the light in the kitchen. The same Alexa gonna turn on the light in the kitchen. For example, if I don't have any speaker over here, I can talk to the speaker, I can use my voice to turn on the light because I don't have any speaker. But I can use my phone to turn on the speaker over here. It's the same thing over there too. If I got the smart speaker in the kitchen, I can say, Alexa, turn on the fan in the kitchen. If I don't have any smart speaker, I can talk to the smart speaker to turn on the light in the kitchen. It's the same thing in the bedroom. It's the same thing over there too. The first thing you're gonna need for your smart home, you're gonna need a mesh Wi-Fi. Gonna give you the same password Wi-Fi any place or anywhere you go in the house. The second thing you need a hub. A hub can be Apple TV or our Fire Stick or Google Chrome. This third thing you're gonna need a smart speaker to make a voice control and voice command to talk about what you need. For a smart home, this is what you really need to know about smart home. For a smart home, this is all device you're gonna use for your smart home. For your smart home first, this is lock for your smart home. If you wanna come inside your house and on your front door, you're gonna use your fingerprint, you're gonna use pad, and you got a physical key, and you can use your phone, clock with your phone to turn on and turn off, close and open your door. This is exactly the smart lock for your smart home. and it got exactly a USB-C if you don't have any power to enter inside your house. If you have your key too, you can enter inside your key. It's worked very well, and I'm gonna show you how you can install your smart lights and everything. If you got an Apple fan, you're gonna have Apple TV for your TV. I'm gonna show you how you can set up your Apple TV on your smart home, everything. We're gonna smart light. Make sure when you buy your smart home device, you make sure if you use Apple, you make sure you see the product you buy, Apple HomeKit. Work with Alexa, Google, or SmartThings for Samsung, and make sure you buy this. Over here, I got a different motion sensor. You can see I got a different motion sensor. I got an Aqara and Eve motion sensor. The motion sensor you use it on stage. For example, if I'm coming, the light gonna turn on and turn off automatically by itself. This is a smart light. The smart light are different. We got so many different smart light. As you see, I'm gonna show you how you can install the smart light. Later on, I'm gonna talk to you about the Aqara. This is a hub. The hub Aqara makes sure you connect every device with Aqara. I'm gonna show you later about that. Don't forget, I talked to you about the mesh Wi-Fi. This is an example. This is a mesh Wi-Fi. You can see the back over here. This is another mesh Wi-Fi over here. You can see you place one with your provider internet, you put the other one on another place, you got the same Wi-Fi connection. And right now we got two switch. This is neutral switch, no neutral required. This is Aqara. I love this brand Aqara. This is smart switch. This is another, this one is a three-way smart switch. Gonna see line 1, line 2, line 3, and ground. For I'm gonna show you how we can use this one everywhere. And right now we got smart switch, no wire. You can just place anywhere you want to access to your light. You got so many commands. You press 1, you turn on the light. You press 2, you turn off the light. You press 3, and the light gonna change color. Everything for the smart. And right now, this is the smart speaker I'm talking to you about. This is a Google smart speaker. You're gonna make a voice comment. This is got a button to privacy microphone, and we got a Alexa. For Alexa, we got a different price, different about the Alexa. You can find later. We're gonna see how you can set up an Alexa. For Apple HomeKit, this is HomePod for Apple HomeKit. You're gonna use, if you love Apple, you're gonna use Apple HomeKit. It depends what about you. And right now, to set up this account for Apple HomeKit, you need the app HomeKit. The app already in Apple, coming with every iPhone. If you wanna use Alexa, this is what you're gonna need. You're gonna use the account Alexa, and to set up Alexa, when you have Alexa, you make sure the device, the smart thing you buy, is going to work with Alexa. If you're gonna use Google Home, you make sure you say, "Hey Google," or make sure that the device is gonna work. Come Google for the Google Smart Home, and for smart thing, Samsung don't have any smart speaker. You can just use any this smart speaker for Samsung too. And this is the smart plug, and we got smart outlet too. I don't have this smart outlet. In the future, when I'm gonna make an installation, right now we're gonna do lab. I'm gonna show you in practice, or you can install lab. This one is existing plug. You can plug to connect. You make your old device to become smart. You can use this smart plug for it. Right now, this is all I got for you to use for smart home for beginner. Okay, stay connected. We're gonna see everything with me. Thank you so much, and see you to the next video.